For as long as the zombie genre has stumbled onto our screens, the trope of the infected survivor has always persisted. And for good reason if you think about it, these characters are always almost done for, serving as a ticking time bomb for the action or horror to ensue. In the George A. Romero pictures of old, this could take place over a day or two. But fast forward to the early and mid 2000s and it was an explosion of rage. Something we all have Danny Boyle to thank for with 28 Days Later. And yes, they might be called infected, but they're zombies, so let's just face it. So that begs the question, what's the creepiest zombie transformation on screen? From the slow to the fast, let's find out, shall we? I'm Ben Roy from WhatCulture.com and this is the 10 creepiest zombie movie transformations. Number 10, Dawn, 28 Weeks Later. Kicking off with 28 Weeks Later, this might have the best opening scene of all the films, or the entire genre. Don and the survivors he's with are completely overrun at the beginning, thanks to taking a random kid in. With only seconds to spare, there's no way for him to save his wife, Alice, so he's forced to make a run for it, with seemingly hundreds of infected behind him. Escaping this by the skin of his teeth, we catch up with Don 28 weeks later, as the government are trying to reintroduce people to Britain, starting with the Isle of Dogs. A bit too quickly, but surely it'll be fine as Don is reunited with his kids, though not all family reunions are that simple. After Alice is found surviving in their family home by the kids, she's brought back to the safe area. And thanks to Don's AAA access, he manages to break quarantine to see her. A quick kiss of death later, and it's all over for them both. And everyone else in the safe zone, pretty much. Don explodes into a fit of rage and ends poor Alice, as she's helplessly tied to a bed. This one's really tough to watch as Alice can't do anything, and Don is so violent here. Robert Carlyle really sells it. Number 9, Dr. Isaacs, Resident Evil Extinction. The Resident Evil movies aren't for everyone, and for the most part, not even for the fans of the games. These are just action horror schlockfests at heart, and pretty much a plaything for Milla Jovovich and Paul W.S. Anderson. But each one of these movies do try and tie something into the games, and with one of the flimsiest ties of them all comes with Ian Glenn's character, Dr. Isaacs, and his terrifying turn towards the closing act. After being bitten by his super zombies, Dr. Isaac desperately tries to save his own life with an extreme dose of antivirus, though all doesn't go too well, as now he becomes the movie's final boss to fight Alice. As a tyrant rather than a zombie, Isaacs becomes a massive hulking lump of flesh, with very disconcerting fingers. If it wasn't for Alice having mind powers and a laser corridor at her disposal, this might have actually been the end of humanity, but instead Isaacs goes the way of Colin Salmon. Number 8, Stephen, Dawn of the Dead 1978. Bringing it all the way back to where the zombie genre was cemented, George A. Romero's fantastic Dawn of the Dead is actually quite lighthearted. After a grim and intentionally chaotic opening, the few survivors we have left make it to the famous shopping mall. Capitalism's modern day castles at the time, but thanks to online shopping, they've gone the way of the dead. And out of all the survivors that make it to the mall, Stephen is the one who has himself together the least, with his nerves visible, taking over his every action. But he does finally come around and they get to lock things up tight, even stopping off for a romantic meal. But this being a zombie film, of course, humans have to mess it all up. But after a bunch of raiders burst in and allow the dead to reclaim the mall, leading to the turn of Stephen. And this one sort of hits different, simply because of the journey he's taken throughout the film. And the first thing he does when he turns is return home, breaking through the barrier and bringing all the zombies with him, because this was the last thing he was going to do before zombification took hold, and this almost damned his friends in the process. Number 7, Julie Walker, Return of the Living Dead 3. Now for one of the most dismal entries on this list. The unfortunate Julie Walker would have arguably been better off staying dead, but thanks to the power of love, or just pure selfishness, she's brought back from the void by her boyfriend. But to be fair, she's kind of responsible for her own death. I mean, who grabs someone's genitals while on a motorcycle? Especially without a helmet? What are you doing? After the crash, Kurt takes her to his secret base and exposes her to secret barrels. The ones full of the zombie fog from the past 2 films, which is meant to lead back to the Night of the Living Dead. But of course, Kurt doesn't know this and just thinks it brings people back from the dead. And for a while it does, and it seems like they've both lucked out. Though it doesn't take long for the never-ending hunger to manipulate Julie, as the virus starts to take over. She does try mutilating her own body to stave off the hunger, but it just doesn't work. Glimpses of humanity break through for just long enough for the couple to rejoin and end it all together as they're consumed by flames. Number 6, The Deer, Train to Busan. If there was ever a contest for most dangerous zombies in a film, then surely the Horde from Train to Busan would top the list. This Korean horror mashes up the infected from 28 Days Later and blends them with the tidal wave effect of World War Z, creating some of the most unstoppable undead yet. Though with that it means we don't really get much time to take in the loss of humanity, or even more so their turn. That's not saying this film doesn't have its moments where it punches you in the gut, because it certainly does. But what could be the most creepiest transformation? Well, the girl on the train at the start really does come close, as her reanimation is so flawlessly executed, really setting up events and kicking off the whole fight for survival. But we're gonna cheat here a little bit and give it to an animal. Yes, the deer during the opening scene that is unceremoniously crushed by a truck. Going from simple roadkill to reanimated in such an unnatural fashion, the final close-up of this CGI creature lets us all know that something's about to go down. Number 5. Frank. 28 Days Later. Arguably the film that reignited the zombie genre. It's funny that so many of its creators insist that it's not a zombie picture, when this just is. Sorry Danny. Not the first to make zombies go fast, 28 Days Later certainly pioneered it and brought it to the mainstream in the most effective way possible, going on to define the modern zombie in the next decade. But with that there was an immense amount of restraint used when having the infected on screen. They were shot in almost rushed and disorientating ways, really putting the viewers into their state of mind. Hearing stories about them is almost as terrifying as when Jim encounters them, but for all the turns and loss of life, it's when Frank is accidentally turned that the film really leaves an impression on the viewers. All it takes is a single drop of blood to fall in his eye and it's game over. Only having a few seconds left, he tells Hannah he loves her before the virus takes hold. This process is so quick, but at the same time seems to last forever, as everyone involved knows what needs to be done, but just doesn't want to do it. Number 4. Jennifer CARMEN. Wreck. Wreck showed that there was still life in the found footage genre, and all you really need to do is set it in a spooky house but fill it with zombies. Feeling like an actual news report, we follow Angela as she is following firefighters throughout the night, but it's just her luck that she happens to follow them the night that they go to the infected complex. After some confusion with an old lady, a group of survivors gather around the main atrium, with all seeming to be fine. That is until a young girl bites her mother and bursts out screaming. It comes out of nowhere and is all over so fast, until the group go and find her in the dark later on. Still unsure of what's going on, they confront her as Jennifer is standing there clearly looking like a demon. And of course, one of them gets bit. Number 3. Andy. Dawn of the Dead 2004. The original Dawn of the Dead got so much right. Then the remake in 2004 took this premise and ramped it up to 11, combining the original Romero script with the running terrors of Boyle. And this was a world-ending blend, as these zombies were actually undead. With runners, this meant we had less time to see the zombies as characters, leaving them as more of a mindless horde than anything else, trying to feed on whatever they could find. But for some reason, not dogs, which actually plays into the fate of Andy. As the main group are held up in the mall, he's left alone in his gun shop, with only a whiteboard to communicate with Kenneth. Using this for target practice or playing chess, it works for a while, but eventually Andy starts to run out of food, and in an attempt to feed him, he's bitten. Though we don't see this at first, Andy tells Kenneth over the walkie-talkie, and then uses the whiteboard to communicate his death, showing that he's gone and his body is a dead husk. Number 2. Lieutenant Muldoon. Planet Terror. Planet Terror is just such a beautiful throwback of a movie, and combine that with Death Proof, it makes the Grindhouse collection a must-watch for any cinephile. After a very confusing deal that opens the film, including dangerous gases and balls, said gas is unleashed, infecting Lieutenant Muldoon and his men, leaving weird boils on his face, but somehow not pushing him all the way. When we catch up with him in the closing act of the movie, he first seems like he's fine, right as rain even, without a mark on his face. But thanks to Abby returning with more balls and a quick chat, Lieutenant Muldoon transforms into a hideous gelatinous blob thing. Unlike any creature before him, it's certainly one transformation that the viewers won't forget. Number 1. Cholo DEMORA. Land of the Dead. One of George A. Romero's most unappreciated works of zombie fiction, Land of the Dead is a hidden gem. Though it didn't make a massive splash like the Dawn of the Dead remake, it brought the traditional zombie movie into the 21st century. Zombies were slow again, resembling shambling corpses, just like they always had. Now years later they weren't rising from their graves as they had won, but now just existing wasn't enough. Wandering around occasionally just wasn't doing it for them, and they needed a purpose once more, and to stop being tormented by the surviving humans. So led by Big Daddy, they stormed Fiddler's Green, and during all this Cholo just happened to be bitten. But instead of killing himself like many others, his dead form would go on to have a purpose, just like the rest. After being screwed by Kaufman, all his zombified self wanted was revenge. And thanks to the ensuing chaos, he got just that. There is something really unsettling to know that once somebody is gone, their corporeal form will still eventually come back. No matter what it takes, just for revenge. And that's our list. That's the 10 creepiest zombie movie transformations. Can you think of any more that can top this? Let us know in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I've been Ben Roy Turner, and you can follow me at Ben Roy Turner and follow us all at What Culture. And until next time,